Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Nupur Vidla. I am the Central Coordinator with BPNI, Breastfeeding Promotion Network of India, and BPNI hosts a think tank called NAPi, Nutrition Advocacy in Public Interest, and I'm a member of that. So we are hosting this press conference on behalf of NAPi. Good afternoon to everyone. On behalf of NAPi and the Lancet, I warmly welcome all members of the press, colleagues, and distinguished guests to this important press conference. We are gathered here today for the launch of the Lancet series on ultra-processed foods and human health, a landmark body of work that brings scientific clarity and global attention to one of the most urgent public health challenges of our time. Ultra-processed foods are displacing diets, influencing health trajectories, and impacting communities across the world, including here in India. Today's discussion will highlight the evidence, implication, and the way forward. We are honored to have with us eminent experts, Dr. Srinath Reddy, the Chancellor of PHFI University of Public Health Sciences, Dr. Vandana Prasad, who's a community pediatrician and also technical advisor to Public Health Resource Society, Dr. Arun Gupta, convener NAPi, and he's also a co-author to one of the papers in this series. They all will share the key insights and the recommendations. I would like to share the program with you today. So, yes, and yes, we have Sylvie with us, who's the nutrition specialist from UNICEF. Sorry for that. Sorry for that. Okay. So let me share the program with you. So after my introduction, I would introduce Dr. I would like to call Dr. Arun to share the series of paper and the methods used for the analysis. Then we will have brief on paper 1, which is on evidence of UPF harms on human health, displacement of traditional diets, and justifies immediate public health action by Dr. Srinath Reddy. Followed by a brief on paper 2, policies to target UPF while improving access to healthy alternatives, as improving diets cannot rely on consumer behavior alone, by Dr. Vandana Prasad. And then a brief on paper 3, a coordinated global response to combat UPF, company's political playbook, by Dr. Arun Gupta. Then we will have remarks by UNICEF on UPF marketing, especially to children, by Ms. Sylvie Kemos. Followed by question and answers for the media, but with Dr. Reddy, as he has to leave early. So after his brief presentation, you may ask him the questions. Okay, thank you, Dr. Arun, over to you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Nupur, for kick-starting this event. Very important event, the Lancet series on ultra-processed food and human health. So, am I audible at the back? Yeah. What's that?
I don't think it's on. Yes.
Hello? Is that audible?
No, I don't think
So
it's
you can
working
use this. You can use this.
It's good. Okay. So I'll briefly let you know how these 3 papers have been developed in this body of work. So the paper 1 is on evidence. So I'll briefly touch on the methodologies of these papers, which have been developed by the 43 authors globally. And the first one is on synthesis of evidence. The authors conducted a new meta-analysis based on the high-quality studies. 104 studies were selected. They were prospective cohort studies and to examine the effects of UPF consumption on human health. And studies below 10,000 sample were actually excluded. So they used the NOVA classification defined as you will see from the slides also what UPFs are. So there is a NOVA classification which was used, and then quality and certainty of evidence was used, establishing the framework such as Newcastle-Atterwork scale for the quality study and Bradford-Hill criteria for the overall evidence that it's sufficient to call for action. So on the paper 2, which is on the policy, it says combine systemic review of food environment policies all over the world. And existing literature was analyzed, again using the ultra-processed food definition as NOVA classification, and the 4 domains were used for the UPF products, which is like for the nutrient composition and reformulation, regulations, etc. Food environment, such as dietary guidelines, FOPL, food marketing restrictions, etc. UPF manufacturers, third, the fast food chains, market and political power activities, and food supply chains, the global trade, agriculture practices, and environmental policies. So these were the 4 areas these authors used for paper 2, and combined for final analysis included this literature review and the professional experience of the authors, which was meted with discussions globally. So, and authors also presented 2 case studies, one from Brazil on the school food environment, and the second from Chile on the food labeling. Third paper, the governance and the corporate power and the political power of the food economy. So again, it was done by a combined literature review. Important thing was that the group held 4 regional workshops to gain insights from and capture the insights from different parts of the world, how industry operates. And then the group also conducted 39 informant interviews with the policymakers, UN, civil society, and other researchers working on the food policy. So we integrated all these inputs through thematic qualitative analysis and found the structural drivers of high consumption of UPFs. So this led to further analysis of the corporate power throughout the world, how corporations operate and how their agencies operate and how the conflict of interest prevails upon these areas, and that has all been analyzed and presented in the paper 3 along with the real world experiences in this. So, and then the group used the definition of conflict of interest and healthy diets and sustainable diets as given in the papers. And recommendations were based on the workshop participants' actions and the discussions among the authors. So this is briefly the methodology used for all the 3 papers. Now we will have one by one each paper gist and brief presented. But I know you all have the papers with you, but we encourage that you read the key messages and the recommendations and the basis of conclusions in all the 3 papers to fully understand. If not fully read all that immediately, but those are the areas which you can draw your attention to. Thank you so much for your attention. Yes.
Yeah. So now I would request Dr. K. Srinath Reddy to present paper 1. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And there's been growing concern worldwide about the huge increase in chronic diseases as well as overweight and obesity. It's been seen that while there's been a considerable amount of progress made in tobacco control, including in low and middle income countries where smoking rates have come down, there's been an increase in chronic diseases, particularly cardiovascular diseases. And there's been, of course, concomitantly a marked increase in the problem of overweight and obesity, starting from childhood onwards, extending across all ages. And there's been a considerable amount of relationship between these two. So some of the Brazilian researchers initially started looking at the nature of diets and seeing how this was correlating with some of the changes that were happening in terms of the health transitions that were taking place. And they classified the diets that we are taking, the foods that are being consumed, into 4 categories. One is number 1, which is absolutely natural foods. Second is products derived from the natural foods like sugar, oil, and honey. The third is a combination of the two, where the natural foods have the derivatives added. And fourth are completely modified foods where there is not much of a presence of the natural food or very minimal, but the texture of the natural foods also is markedly altered by the process of industrial alterations. And there are several additives that are added also which are harmful. So, looking at these ultra processed foods, uh, whereas number three would be possibly processed foods, these are ultra processed foods where there's a considerable amount of industrial interference with the nature and the composition of the food products that are being consumed. They decided to look at what the effects are in terms of the dietary consumption and its impact on health. They noted that basically there are multiple nutrient imbalances in these foods. There is increased energy intake because the texture of the food is altered. People tend to chew less. There is hyperpalatability, and there is poor signaling to the brain of satiety. As a result, there is an excessive consumption of these foods. And there is also simultaneously a reduced intake of protective phytochemicals that come from the natural foods, especially the plants. And there is an increased intake of what are called xenobiotics, which are substances foreign to our biological systems, to which we have not been accustomed during our evolutionary process, and now they're being introduced all of a sudden into our body. And it's also true that it's not just that we are eating very strange foods in this form, but the microbiome, the gut microbiome, which is a very important constellation of bacteria and other microbes, particularly the bacteria, which are resident in our gut and which are very helpful for us in fighting diseases, in digesting the fiber that we can't digest, and produce a number of nutrients, including vitamins for us. These, the microbiome itself is unaccustomed to these kind of foreign substances that are coming up in the ultra processed foods. So what we see is what we call gut dysbiosis, where instead of a healthy microbiome, we have a very unhealthy microbiome. And whereas the healthy microbiome will digest these foods and produce more of what are called short chain fatty acids, the unhealthy microbiome produces what's called a TMAO, which is trimethylamine N oxide, which is very dangerous from the point of view of inflammation and causing injury to blood vessels and many other tissues in the body. So what is happening with these foods is there are multiple changes that are happening in the body, which are resulting not only in overweight, especially in abdominal obesity, but a lot of other changes that are happening, mediated mostly through inflammation of multiple tissues, and that results in disease in very many forms, particularly cardiovascular disease. So these people started looking at how best to correlate this with the disease manifestations, and they found that there is a substantial amount of correlation that was established in a number of observational studies, and they also looked at whatever the literature had to offer in terms of clinical trials. But the clinical trials are difficult to mount in large populations, particularly with varied diets. Therefore, much of the evidence comes from very well designed observational studies, but supplemented by some clinical trials, especially on the impact on weight. But they found basically that there were a lot of changes that could be attributed across multiple populations, across multiple countries, studied across different continents. And many of them were pooled analysis drawn from all of these studies. They found there was a definite association with increased all-cause mortality, cardiovascular mortality, obesity, diabetes, chronic kidney disease, and what's called fatty liver or metabolic associated steatohepatitis, and also in increasing number of recent reports also associated with neurological disorders, including possibly dementia and reduced cognition. So what we are seeing is many tissues in the body are now being affected through the inflammatory process, as well as through deprivation of protective nutrients, and that is resulting in multitude of diseases, with overweight and obesity as the most prominent visible manifestation of this, and this happening right from childhood onwards, where childhood obesity is now an advertised addiction resulting in marketed maladies. So that is why we are now seeing all of this happening across continents, across age groups. So there was some criticism of this paper and of this evidence and this type of analysis, and the authors decided to counter it, uh, saying that we know that there are some critics who are challenging this on scientific basis. What the industry says is a different thing, but we'll answer the scientific criticism. Firstly, the question is there a problem with the food frequency questionnaire, where people may find it difficult to recall what happened several days ago? Should we be using 24-hour recall? In some of the studies, 24-hour recall was used, but in many of the other studies done with many other disease conditions, food frequency questionnaire was found to be valid enough to give adequate evidence. And given the number of studies that have covered several population groups, this appears to be fairly valid, and the conclusions can be depended upon. Then the next question was whether there is a question of mechanisms being identified, because normally you say observational studies will yield correlation but not causation. So how can you attribute causation to this? So they also showed that there are multiple physiological mechanisms which are there in the causal pathway, which are plausible and which are very clearly associated. And after all, even for smoking, when there are multiple chemicals that are associated in the tobacco smoke, you can't pinpoint one or two chemicals. So they draw the analogy from that, but they say this is enough for initiating public health action. But we also now know that there is a tremendous amount of evidence that's coming in from physiological studies, like for example on the microbiome, on the TMAO and others, which are clearly demonstrating that there are definite physiological pathways which explain the mechanism. Then the other thing, of course, question was whether there is too much of heterogeneity in these food products. Are the food products too varied? And therefore, how do you actually say this is bad, that's good, or this is indifferent? They say that it's not the question of food products, it is the nature of the composition that matters. How much of the NOAA 4 products are there? How much of the food texture has been disturbed? How much of energy dense food characteristics are there? And how much of replacement of natural nutrients is there? So these are well matched across different type of food products, so it does not matter. So for enough for policy and public health action. So I think they've defended their paper very well. Now, in terms of the question of what needs to be done, that of course will follow in the next presentation, but it's very clear that they have made a very strong case that it's time for public health action. And I would just like to say that what they're recommending in terms of natural diets with natural foods minimally disturbed in texture, where you're not trading taste for texture and you're not trading nutrients for hyperenergy dense composition, that is actually good for health. And in fact, now that Mr. Jacket is also there in the audience, may I say that it's very important for us to also draw from the another Lancet report, which is on the diet for planetary health, which also talks about how important natural diets are in order to prevent the damage to the planet. Just let me close on one point when we talk about natural diets. Now, GLP-1 is becoming very important. GLP-1 agonists are the largest selling medical product globally. The Financial Times says that in India too, it is the number 2 in terms of total commercial worth of sales, and it's rapidly rising to the top. People are spending a huge amount of money trying to lose weight. But GLP-1 is not a chemical product produced by the industry. It's a natural hormone produced by the small intestine of our body. It's been there for ages. And the GLP-1 levels go up, and its release is facilitated when we take fruit and vegetables, especially green leafy vegetables, apples, nuts, and seeds. So instead of wasting billions of dollars on that, what we ought to be doing is having natural diets which are replete in natural chemicals with nutrients, and certainly avoid ultra processed foods which are highly artificial and injurious to health and are driving the epidemic of obesity and overweight as well as of chronic diseases. And one final point they make is that overweight and obesity are now also having a reversal of social gradient. Just like cardiovascular disease and others start in the high income groups and later on gravitate to involve the low income groups as the most vulnerable groups. That happened already even in India. We are seeing the low income groups highly vulnerable to cardiovascular disease. Overweight and obesity also comes down as ultra processed foods become much more affordable, much more widely advertised, and much more widely sponsored by including people like film actors who ought to know better. Thank you.
Because sir has to leave early, if any of you have any question, you may ask him. He has to leave now in some time. Do we have another mic? This mic?
Yeah, I think it's working.
It's working now?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone?
Water, thank you. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think.
Can I ask a question?
Yes. Sure.
Just take full advantage of Sir's presence here. So you were talking about drugs that are, for lowering obesity that are becoming more and more common. So just to be devil's advocate, just for people to understand, what's wrong if, we know that it's produced naturally and would be produced if we take fruits and vegetables and so on and so forth. What's wrong with taking these in the form of a pill rather than in terms of natural products?
Well, the thing is, when there is a natural hormone that's being produced, it is responding to multiple stimuli and it's responsive to multiple other balancing factors. There are checks and balances introduced by many other hormones and metabolites. Now, GLP-1 may reduce weight substantially, but now increasingly the side effects are becoming quite well reported. Initially, they started off with intestinal effects like intussusception and so on. Then came up the question of suicidal ideation, but that is not very certain because it appears that even those taking other forms of drugs also may have suicidal ideation. But the most dangerous effect that's been consistently reported in recent years from Europe and North America, now increasing from elsewhere, is what's called sarcopenia. You tend to lose a lot of muscle. So you may lose weight, but not just in terms of fat, but you lose a lot of muscle. And that is leading to not only just orthopedic problems and spinal problems, but falls and so on. And that's becoming an important challenge as well. So if you take drugs to lose weight, you may not necessarily only have that as your side effect, but there are many other side effects that may come in. So you'll have to be ready to brace up for that.
Okay.
Dr. Reddy, I have a question.
Hi.
Sorry.
Is there a definition of the ultra processed food and how it is different from these HFSs?
Yeah.
I think the same thing or the other same thing?
See, basically, you can look at the paper. In fact, the paper very clearly describes what the differences are. You may have energy dense foods where the structure and the texture of the food is not altered. And there are no artificial additives like emulsifiers, taste enhancers, and others. So here you're having an element where you're destroying the natural texture of the food and at the same time bringing a great deal of artificial additionality into it.
Your kit has a small table
Yeah.
also showing that if the
Indian laws, but they're definitely in the exercise laws about ultra.
no, India doesn't have anything on ultra processed food yet. So we want an addition to this. That's where we are actually. This
But
is a new
there
thing.
is a document, ISMR document.
Yeah.
I think this is off now. It's not working anymore.
He's handling on the mic system.
But we've included the ISMR note in this, which sort of defines ultra processed food. It's
And-
there in the
Yeah,
kit.
the note has
Yes.
it. So we have picked up the paper, as Dr. Reddy said. Paper also has a panel on definition of NOVA 1, 2, and 3, and we have also shared with you some of the. If you want more information, well, infographics created by the Lancet, they are also available. So we can share that also in that sense. Yeah. Yes, Nupur. Yes.
So,
Okay.
rather than
Thank you so much, Dr. Reddy, for coming over. He has a flight to catch, so he has to leave now. So we will just now move to the second
Thank you.
part.
Foremost, I think we really need to congratulate the Lancet for bringing out this series in the first place. You know, I mean, this has been a burning issue for us as members of NAPi and advocates in India, and the issue of evidence and really where is the proof and what really is it all about. You know, questions have come up on what exactly does it mean, this ultra processed foods and so on. These issues have been around for the last many years, but it's really amazing to have this consolidation of the evidence, of the recommendations, so clearly put out by the authors in these three very, very detailed papers, of which I'm going to be tackling paper number 2. And I particularly want to congratulate Professor Carlos Monteros for leading this globally, and also our own Dr. Arun Gupta for leading this nationally, these issues so steadfastly and so determinedly. I think the Lancet has really provided strength to all our elbows in what is definitely a common fight for all of us. We're fighting for the health of our children. We're fighting for the health of our country. So this is paper number 2. And I think it's a really interesting paper. It's 13 pages of very, very dense information on policy changes that have happened across the world already, where Latin America has clearly taken the lead on many of these issues, because we know that obesity has really troubled those countries massively, and the concomitant NCD growth in NCDs, and India and others are on a cusp where we are rapidly reaching those levels, but we haven't yet gone there, and so there's a lot more to save for us. And it's this consolidation that is spelling out what has happened in various phases, the history of it, the facts of it, the reasons for doing it, and has also evaluated what has worked and what hasn't worked. So it's also evidence on policy. So whereas the first paper was evidence on what ultra-processed foods do to us, this is on policy, existing data on policy, as well as the evidence on that policy and what works and maybe what needed to have been done more. It's also a very comprehensive paper. But I think the first point that it makes, go to the next please, yeah. The first point that it makes is really major, and it's saying that there is enough evidence for us not to wait anymore for policy action. I must tell you anecdotally that Arunji and I, we were part of a representation to the technical committee of FSSA some years ago, maybe it was 5 or 6 years ago, and we were talking about high fat, sugar and salt foods, and then we said, but we must also consider UPFs, and immediately the technical committee placed to us, where is the evidence? And we said there's growing evidence, and we have been pushing growing evidence to them, because paper came out like 1 paper, 2 papers, 3 papers like that. But this is a consolidation by none other than the Lancet, and I think that this is going to be very meaningful to tell our own policymakers that now there is a strong evidence. So the first point being made is we need not delay policy action for the lack of evidence. It's not that we have complete evidence, but there is by no means insufficient evidence for us to take steps. And policy intervention is particularly urgent in countries like India, where UPF consumption is rising the fastest, yet it is controllable if we act quickly. We have not gone that far. I mean, obesity is rising very sharp, but the absolute numbers are still not so high that we can't. Our food systems have not yet been unsaved. And I really want to make a point about food system, because this policy paper goes into food systems in such depth, which is very, very appreciable. I'll make some of those points also. It stresses that improving diets cannot be achieved by relying solely on individual behavior, because all the time people speak of, people, it's their own choice. तो आपकी मर्जी है, आप मतलब आप मत पीजिए कोक, आप मत खाइए चिप्स, as though there is no environment in which all that happens, as though there's no political economy of people making those choices and so on and so forth. This paper clearly states that it cannot be achieved by relying solely on individual behavior and needs regulatory action upon the entire food system, and they spell it out very comprehensively. Next slide. So this is a kind of a diagram that the Lancet has created to showcase how comprehensively we need to look at this food system and food environment. And they talk basically in 4 terms, which is the products themselves, how to identify those products, the UPF products, क्या होते हैं और उसको कैसे पहचानना चाहिए, मतलब how can people understand what is a UPF product or not. Then UPF food environments, which is basically where do these function, so schools, hospitals, retail sales and so on, malls. So they talk about that and that regulation at that front. And they talk about manufacturers as well, food supply chains, where they talk from agriculture to everything else that is related to the marketing chains and so on, food supply chains. And then finally they also talk about the corporations, which Dr. Gupta will be talking about more. So they are talking about production, marketing and consumption all together, and policies that are needed comprehensively at all these levels, which is at the individual consumption, but very much more importantly, because the focus has been on individual consumption, on the systemic regulatory things that need to happen from the food, marketing, supply chain and so on and so forth. So I want to come to, because most of the slides are going to be on the specific focus on what kind of laws and policy changes are specifically recommended for UPFs. But I want to make one point which is at the end, which is again to do with agriculture, because I really feel that's, it's very valuable for us to understand how deep and how far all this goes. I'm going to quote, this is under the section of policies for food supply chains. It says, the growth of UPFs has been fueled by agricultural systems designed to produce cheap ingredients, such as corn, soy, sugar and oils through large-scale industrial monoculture. And we know how this also affects undernutrition in our own country, the fact that people are growing cash crops, they do not have diversity of diets and so on and so forth. So, but it is this system, the UPF system, that is driving these agricultural changes. It also says that we must support diverse, locally oriented food production in low-income and middle-income countries like India, because we still have that to save. Addressing infrastructure gaps such as storage and marketing. It also says that compared with locally prepared, minimally processed foods, UPFs contribute more heavily to climate and ecological harm. So all the public health things that we're dealing with, from undernutrition to climate change and so on, this is all being led and driven by the UPF food system, the UPF marketing systems. Through intensive ingredient sourcing, excessive plastic packaging and high water use and production. So you see, this is how deep it goes. And then from there on to the marketing and to the companies, the big food companies and so on and so forth. So next slide, please. Who was helping me? Yeah. So now coming to this question that you had asked. So what is high fat, sugar and salt needs essential action? Because in India we have not done that also. So clearly we have not achieved anything on this high fat, sugar and salt. But it's not enough. We must also act on ultra processed foods that needs to be recognized in addition to HFSS. Why? Firstly, what is the difference? So ultra processed foods would have things like colorants, emulsifiers, additives of various kinds, chemicals of various kinds. They would break down the essential food structure. So a high fat, sugar and salt may be more natural than something that is being called in the Nova 4 and ultra processed food. That itself has its problems. But ultra processed foods per se, even if they're not high fat, sugar and salt, have problems by dint of the fact that they have tampered with food. In fact, they should not be called food at all. No, they are not food. They are some manufactured artificial thing, which is additive, which makes you crave for more, which gives you a lot of calories very easily. It's also cheap. It's very tasty. we all know kurkure, no? Our children know kurkure better than they know fruits and vegetables, unfortunately. So this is what it says. The Lancet clearly defines UPFs and emphasizes that we need policies for both reduction of HFSS independently, plus we cannot afford to ignore UPFs. Why? Because the next slide makes it more clear. Many of the companies, when they're faced with HFSS regulations, what they do is, अगर X percentage regulation में आता है sugar का, तो उसे X minus 1% कर देंगे. Say it is 10% is the border, they'll make it 9.9%. So now it's no longer falling in the definition of HFSS, but it will still, and it may still fall under the definition of ultra processed food because it has those emulsifiers, colorants, various kinds of things for taste enhancement and so on and so forth, preservatives as well. So this is what they're saying. So and the NOVA classification has been pitched in this Lancet paper. It's very easy. It's a classification of 4 categories, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 is the best, 2 is slightly worse but not too bad. 3 is somewhat worse, like bread would fall in NOVA classification 3, right? And 4 is the kurkure, lays, soda, beverages, that kind of variety. So it's a very simple classification for even lay people to understand, and it's pushing that classification. It's also giving us various examples, like Colombia is mandating warning labels on foods that are HFSS, plus also there is warning for non-nutritive sweeteners. अब आप देखो diabetics के लिए क्या है कि नहीं, it is no added sugar, but what you have is a whole lot of sweeteners. They're not innocent, and they're not, they're not free of poor health effects, ill health effects. So Colombia has done that. California has defined UPF in law. We have not even defined HFSS, abhi but so they have gone that far. And I also want to say that Mexico and Argentina have labeled for caffeine. They have banned the caffeine or regulated caffeine for children under the age of 14. So that also has been done. So caffeine is not HFSS, but it is falling under the UPF category, right? So these things are becoming more and more important. Policy action should be coordinated to reduce UPF production, marketing and consumption. All 3 areas need to be done simultaneously. Next, please. So is reformulation helpful? Like many of the food, big food companies will say, ठीक है, हम HFSS को कम कर देते हैं. We also are very concerned about the health of the nation and so on and so forth. And that this paper clearly shows evidence that they do that at the cost of adding UPF. They will reduce the sugar, but they will add sweeteners. And that also does not work for us. So it's actually an escape route for companies to reformulate in this way if we do not regulate for ultra processed foods. That's why the regulation for ultra processed foods becomes very, very important. So, for example, Bonvita and Cerelac, they reduce sugar by a small percentage, but the products remain as harmful because if you take the standard of UPFs, then they are still full of UPFs, right? So, clear limits on UPF ingredients, which I've spelled it out. So, sweeteners, emulsifiers, for example, and in addition to fat, sugar, and salt, should be set to prevent unhealthy ingredient substitutions. Next, please. So now exactly what policies have been recommended by this paper, and it's quite specific in those terms. So it says ban UPFs in schools, hospitals, public institutions to contribute to healthy food environment. Gives the example of Brazil's national school feeding program, which has eliminated most UPFs with 90% of the food required to be real or minimally processed food. Whereas we are moving to what? To ready to eat stuff and so on and so forth. Dabbe mein se usme garam pani dal ke poha banao and all that kind of thing. So we are moving in the opposite direction. Unfortunately, one gap in this paper that I feel quite strongly about, and I think I've mentioned it in another slide, is that they're not reflecting. They do talk about not just regulation of UPFs, then you need to promote the consumption of the good foods, which are so expensive. So you need to promote that. So you need to provide subsidy, you need to make that affordable and so on. And they give examples of that, and again they quote Brazil. But I think here India has a lot to protect because we have the PDS system, we have the midday meal system, we have the hot cooked meals in the ICDS, and these are all actually in some ways subsidies to promote the consumption of locally sourced hot cooked meals, which are supposed to be completely natural and UPF free. So we have also a good system that we need to actually protect and make sure that that continues. So they're also talking about marketing regulations, banning on advertisements, sponsorships of schools, sports, celebrity endorsements. Whereas we are in a situation where we have some of these big food companies even sponsoring our own pediatric conferences still. I mean, Abhi, something was happening, they don't sponsor that. So we are in this situation where even that is not regulated even by our own professional associations. Next, please. And we know that the NMAP, which is, what's the full form of NMAP? The
National Multi-Sectoral Action.
Plan for NCDs. So we are very concerned about diabetes and hypertension in the country. No, so there was this very good NMAP plan that was set forward in 2017. It promised a whole lot of this, but actually, and it didn't promise all these specifics, but in general terms, all these things were promised under those guidelines, and they have not been still not been accomplished. And so, what were those? So, a high priority. Firstly, define UPFs and HFSs. Even now, we have not really put out a government, directive to define it as per ICMR NIN dietary guidelines. No, that's a fact. And we should also use the NOVA classification for defining the UPFs further. And we may set up an expert panel under the scientific committee to do so, but this needs to be done like fairly urgently. It's been, holding fire for a long time. Ban advertisements of UPFs and HFS products at least during watershed timings, meaning they should not be able to influence children at least. And so at least from 5:30 a.m. to 9 p.m. and many countries have done that, 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. types. Those kind of timings have been set कि उस समय में advertisement coke का नहीं हो सकता है and so on and so forth. So that kind of thing. Mandate warning labels. Clearly this paper says that there is evidence that FOPL is necessary, but FOPL of the warning label variety is there's evidence to say it works much better than any other type, which is the traffic light or the stars and so on. So clearly the paper is giving that evidence and corroborating what we've been saying.
It's the only which works.
It's the only thing that works, in fact. And the others are called, in fact, health halos. And it gives the example of how many countries have regulated on health halos and not allowed bad foods to say, well, I still get 1 star, I still get 2 stars, that's a golden star. So they're not permitting health halos either. And the paper refers very clearly to health halos. Next, please. So, and health taxes on selected UPFs. We should tax them more. And we know that at least 100 countries have a soda tax today in the world. The paper says that. Whereas what have we done in the last GST? We've actually reduced taxes on many of the ultra-processed foods and pre-processed foods. So actually the cost has come down, not gone up. Now there is a concern here that because the poorest of the poor source the ultra-processed foods, because they're cheaper, they're more easily available, they're convenient, then it should not affect the poorest of the poor, this tax. So what should you do? You use that tax to subsidize for healthy foods for people who are not able to afford them otherwise. That is what the recommendation is. So fresh food subsidies for low-income households, protect and enhance the and I say this, protect and enhance the NFSA entitlements. Not the paper has not said it.
Right.
This is me saying it, that we must protect and enhance the NFSA entitlements of TDS, midday meals and HCMs and ICDS. Then the paper says affordable and convenient fresh options and supermarkets, fast food restaurants through price regulation. Again, our fresh food, like we speak of fruits and vegetables, but if you really were to compute the cost of that for a poor household, and IFPRI has done that, it's too expensive for anybody to spend on, and to use that for potable drinking water infrastructure. Next, please. So make UPF as a high priority national health issue. Track UPF consumption. Where's the data? I think, did you say that perhaps NFHS 6 is going to capture some data on HFSs, and we hope so?
Some products.
We know that we're in a situation where data is like, it's not very transparent what data is going to come from which surveys and so on, but we are hoping that there will be some data from NFHS 6 and nationwide data may be collected on a regular basis. And finally, the Economic Survey of India 2024-25 so recently recognizes this issue, calling for stronger regulation of food labeling and marketing because voluntary self-regulation is ineffective. Another point that this paper constantly makes. I think that's it. Next. Yeah. Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
Now would you request to give a presentation on paper 3.
Yeah, the paper 3 is about what is holding on. So, as Dr. Reddy said, and then Vandana presented, what policies are required. Paper 3 looks at it. What is the obstacle? Why are we not doing the policies, not only in India but globally? Why only few countries have done it so far? So that's what the analysis of the paper 3 is. Clearly, this is the big food corporations which are holding on and which are obstructing the policies globally. And I'll share with you this morning the Reuters did a story on this, and the food industry has come up with a demand that we should be part of this policy making. So that's what we are objecting. That's why the policies are not made appropriately, adequately, sufficiently, or which could protect health of our citizens. So because industry is in India is sitting on the same table, and that too in a majority. It's like the industry dominates the tables where FOPL has been discussed for the last 12 years. That's why FOPL is not seen the light of the day. We might get something out of the Supreme Court if it really takes a look at on 24th of November. I hear that. Yeah, next slide. Yeah, so we now have the evidence which is clear that, so these are 3 Ds you need to be aware of. So there is clear evidence that the ultra processed food UPFs, they displace normal healthy whole foods. Then there is evidence that they degrade your food dietary quality. So that's an important thing to remember. So the evidence presented there, and then the presented evidence of disease that linked to 12 diseases by the whole meta-analysis which Dr. Reddy presented. But more specifically, what percentage of change is required is given in the diagram in the paper itself. Yeah. So when we actually Kalyan was asking this question, so these group 1, 2, and 3. Group 1 is the real natural foods where you don't add any additives or salt or sugar even. 2 is about salt and sugar and fats and like butter we prepare from these foods. Now third is you mix up and prepare these. For example, preserved, like you have you say a fruit is preserved in a sugary mixture, right? Or a salty mixture or a frozen thing or something, but the food matrix is not disturbed here. So that's a clear difference between Nova 3 and Nova 4, where the food matrix is broken. That is why this category came. The reason is, I'll share after finishing with you a 30-second video from Carlos, the lead author. What happened was that Brazil has been doing surveys every 5 years. They found in 2009 that their obesity was going up, despite the fact that they found that the sugar consumption at the table and some other carbs are going down. So that's where they started looking at what else. That's where they found that this ultra processed, pre-packaged, industrially formulated products, they were increasing in the diets, and then the research started. So that's this definition has UPF definition has been used in more than 1,000 papers. I think about 1,500 papers published in last 4 years. They have used this definition to identify what affects what. So what are the ill effects of that? Next, please. Yeah, so this is again a infographic from the Lancet only, that how this is leading to the ultra processed food is actually tilting the balance, and this is how the dietary quality is impacted. And it also important that it leads to overeating. They are addicting. There are substances in that they don't let you stop eating them. So that is also a reason of a massive weight gain, which in one of the studies which Lancet paper also quotes, that in 14 days, 20 adults, they were on 80% UPF diet, they gained 900 grams on an average. And when the diet was reserved, they lost 900 grams. So that's the proof on this. This was done in NIH of US. So it was an experimental trial on 20 adults who came forward for the study. Yeah, next slide. So what is driving and who is driving? So this paper very clearly makes a point that it is the corporate power, not the people, who are driving this. This is not the consumer choice, as Vandana explained very nicely. So what is driving is they buy cheap ingredients in bulk and they just splash all over the world. So that's why they keep the price lower, because these products are not made for eating. They are made for generating money. So that's the intent you need to understand. So these products are not made for your health. They are made that companies want to make money out of them. So that's why they want cheap. Then they do intensive marketing. I'll show you next slide how much money was used by them. And highly palatable. They add the flavors, the colors, the flavor enhancers, the emulsifiers, and all that. That is what Kalyan defines ultra processed foods. If a food product in your ingredient list has an emulsifier, it has a stabilizer, it has a color, it has a flavor, you bet it is ultra processed, according to the definition provided by Lancet. So now the global sales of the current sales is $1.9 trillion. So and you'll see these 8 companies, they are driving the more than 50% of this share. So these are Nestle, PepsiCo, Unilever, Coca-Cola, Danone. This is a Mexican company, FEMO, Mondelez, and Kraft. I'm sure all of you in the room must have eaten products made by one of them. So they control 50% of the market share in the past 5 decades. So that's the analysis these authors did to come out with the conclusion that who is driving this problem. Yeah, next. So the $2.9 trillion payouts were done between 62 to 23. So these last 50 years, and these are all from the food services or the catering services, or all those combined. But even out of that, more than 50% share of that was these 8 companies. So that is why that's the power. I'll show you in next slide how the power is gathered and how this money is used. The money is used for marketing, and that's the political and the economic power. So it's much more a food economy issue now. You have to set your economy right and then improve the health of the people. Then this model has to be disrupted. This is a business model for selling ultra processed unhealthy food products. Next. So now this is I know you won't be able to read it from there, but I'll explain. These are 207 groups we identify globally. They belong to, these white ones are industries, and then then there are economic forums, then the industry associations, then the agencies funded by industry. So these are different types of networks. Together they are 207. They use their power and influence both at the political level, technical level. They fund organizations who are producing counter data, and this is the economic power. That is where the shift is coming to unhealthy food products, because the system is displacing the real food. The whole system together works towards that. Yeah, next please. Now the marketing power. Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, and Mondelez, only 3 companies, $13 billion in 2024, which is 4 times WHO's operational budget. That is money spent on advertising ultra-processed foods in 2024 only. That demonstrates the power. So this data is available in the paper. I just picked up few things so that we can do it in a 15-minute period. Yep. Next slide. So how do they operate? These corporations, they lobby, or you see the 207 networks, they operate, they lobby to block the regulations, which is happening right now, and the intent was shown this morning by the International Food Business Operators Association secretary, saying that we want to be sitting on the policy tables. Partnership with the government departments, food related Now you pick up any government department today, Food Safety Authority, Ministry of Food Processing, Ministry of Health, ICMR or others, they do not hesitate to partner with these companies. This is the strategy of the companies, not the government. You need to be clear about it. Where from these strategies come? They come as a proposals from the government. Few days back, Nupur was attending a meeting, the Food Safety Authority. Stakeholder, they call it stakeholder. Now I heard this word stakeholder, but under the guise of the stakeholder, every industry person sits in, and there were 700 people attending that day, and they said, we want to have partnership with you. We will do your guidelines. Why are you worried about HFSS? We will do, and ICMR is nothing. NIN is nothing, they said. And this is how they operate. WHO is nothing. They said they don't know anything. We will give you the best guideline. So this is what they do. And then you know the ASCI, Advertising Standard Council of India. This is a membership of food industry body and other advertising commercial products. So they are now monitoring the food industry or any other ads given to them by the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting. They have high level access. Manufacturer doubts. Now this is an example, very recent example, a Ministry of Food Processing. They issued a document called Frequently Asked Questions on Different Concepts of Food Processing and focus on ultra-processed food products. And they end up labeling the ultra-processed food products in their diagrams as healthy, giving their own reasons. So that's how, and this has been done as acknowledged. I have that email with me in case you want that all the food industry was able, this was developed literally by the food industry. So this is how they manufacture doubts, and they want to be part of the solution through stakeholders and use of also litigations. If you remember, there was a case in the Supreme Court, Baba Ramdev's advertising policies were challenged, and all the food industry people thrown by the big advocates, they were inside the court, asking the court not to do this, not to do that, So they do litigations counter to what the public health says. Yeah, next. So just to highlight the point which Vandana mentioned about why we are worried is that this is India. So in this graph, if you see, most of the high income countries, they are falling here. This is the consumption. So consumption is very high. For example, in USA, the growth is zero. Right. India, the growth in the past, like from 2009 to 23, is more than 150% growth. Right? Few more countries are near here. But India is still not very high on the consumption. So that's an important thing. And the series also very clearly advocates that the countries who have just started to use UPFs or even smaller scale, they need to act much more faster than the countries, because it's very hard to change things in US which cross 50% of their diet as ultra processed foods. So this is the graphic from the Lancet itself. Yeah. Next, please. Now, why India? Now, this graphic prepared by NAPi shows you what is the situation in India. Now, see the graph, they so run parallel to each other. These are two obesity graphs of women and men. So, from 2005 to 2019, see the growth of the obesity graph. And this is the ultra-processed food consumption graph taken from the same data. And this is the sharply goes up to, it has risen 40-fold from 2005 to 2019. So this is an important thing to note. Even though we are still low consumption, but the rising fast will move the tilt to high consumption maybe in 10 years. Do we want to go there with 1 in 4 persons suffering from obesity and 1 in 4 suffering from diabetes or pre-diabetes? So this is the national data, not of NAPi or anybody. So this is the national data Yeah. Next, please. So recommendations. From this paper, we bring these recommendations that we need to disrupt this business model, number one. Unless we do disruption of this business model, it won't change. And for that disruption, the specific recommendations are actually that there must be a conflict of interest policy. But who makes the policy? Who designs the policy? Who writes the content of the policy? That must be clarified and applied to not that city. So it means ending stakeholder consultations. We are proposing, stop using this term stakeholder. This is very wide. This kills the whole thing in a minute. Ever since has been started using stakeholder term in the global scene, if you Google it, you will find this is last 30, 40 years only when this term has come up. Because industry was being challenged, so they brought this as a strategy. And ASCII partnership. So this is how we disrupt things, right? And discuss the implement. We are not saying don't talk to the industry. Talk to the industry, discuss implementation with them, but these groups should sit separately. They should not be sitting on the same table to draw a policy. And then we also suggest that we should develop an Indian national coalition which is free from conflict of interest with diverse policymakers and public health experts. Next, please. Yeah, one more slide. So, our upcoming plans, and then I'll close with one more slide, is the overall thing. So, this is what is happening now. In January, we are going to host a policy dialogue around Lancet involving several people, and we will probably lead to a coalition. What is UPFan? Is Ultra Processed Food Action Network. This has just come up yesterday. The global authors have decided to have a ultra processed food action network. So that will continue to do research, share findings, and also push for policies. And onwards, we are also going to use this for advocacy. Yeah, next. So finally, just to summarize what in the context of India, these three papers recommend. So we have analyzed for India 7 policy asks, which have been said earlier also, but I'll just briefly share with you. So as a high priority, make it a high priority issue. Define UPF and HFSS, which is just HFSS. I'm told this is on the table, taking years, but still on the table. Ban the advertisement of UPF as the NMAP recommends to amend 2 laws which control print media and electronic media and television. So both can be including, so it bans only HFSS, but we are saying add UPF definition to it. Mandate warning labels, integrate UPF restriction in the schools, colleges, canteens and social feeding programs. Mechanism of conflict of interest, and then track UPF consumption, and for UN and other agencies and donors without conflict of interest, they could support these actions. So these are the 7 asks we are demanding, and we need to be interacting with the governments and with the policymakers and or larger civil society for that. Thank you very much.
Now I would like to invite Ms. Sylvie Pinot, nutrition specialist, UNICEF India, for her remarks.
Yes, I will sit because I don't have PowerPoint.
It's okay, wait, just
Can switch this off.
इनको बंद कर दो, बंद कर दो बस.
This is working?
yes, yes.
You,
Anything you're comfortable with, that is also okay. Just check this.
it's not. Leave it.
Is it working?
Not really, no.
Okay. So thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. So today we've heard a very powerful set of presentation, and they are all pointing at the same truth that the Lancet series make impossible to ignore. Globally, food environments are being rapidly reshaped by UPFs, and the consequences for health, children, and future human capital are profound. The speakers before me have highlighted very critical issues and areas for actions. From UNICEF perspective, I wish to spotlight a few things that have not come up yet to avoid repetition. And of course, it will be around children, how UPF are affecting particularly children. So UPFs are a major and urgent threat to children's health. The Lancet series shows that UPFs are now one of the most serious yet poorly addressed risks to child nutrition and health. Evidence links UPF and all forms of malnutrition. It's not only overweight and obesity, it is also about micronutrient deficiencies and even stunting and wasting. It's also linked to metabolic problems, mental health concerns, and especially given that children rapid growth and development is affecting them more. And this exposure starts from birth. Do you know that even breast milk substitutes are UPFs? So a mother that, if she decides not to breastfeed exclusively, but to give infant formula, this is UPF, this is harming the baby. Same is true with so many complementary food that are manufactured, what we call baby food, and we buy in the shop. This is UPF, full of sugar and any other ingredients that should not be there. So I think this is very important to know that UPF is affecting everyone. Second, children are heavily exposed and uniquely vulnerable. The test preferences are shaped very early. In fact, from the infancy stage, the test is shaped. So UPF condition children towards sweet, salty, and highly flavored food. After, if you give a normal food that has less salt, less sugar, etc., they will not like it. Also, the cognitive immaturity makes them especially susceptible to marketing because they don't have the critical thinking. So they absorb everything. They are so vulnerable to advertisement and marketing. UPF are widely available in places where children live, learn, and play. You go outside around schools, a lot of UPF on the sidewalk, a lot of little sellers of UPF, in childcare center, in sports facilities, and nearby retail outlets. Sponsorship and visibility normalize UPFs consumption, making avoidance nearly impossible. Third, digital marketing massively intensifies this exposure. In India especially, digital penetration is so high, especially among youth. Digital food marketing is personalized. Algorithms, influencers, and gaming integrations deliver personalized UPF marketing that is constant and often invisible to adults. It is designed to bypass children's limited ability to recognize persuasions. So all the push notifications, the app-based promotions, the influencers, the partnerships targeting discounts, subscription-based benefits on food delivery app, and other algorithmic content increasingly shape children's food choices. So when we talk about marketing, it's not only television or outside the advert. Digital marketing is really harming profoundly the health and nutrition of the children. Because it creates a 24/7 marketing ecosystem. So it works very well. Regular scouting on of emerging marketing channels, platforms to update regulation in real time will be critical to ensure marketing regulations are adaptive and not reactive. Many countries, I know one example from Australia, are doing the scouting of the digital marketing to try to change and protect children. Fourth, effective policy exists and countries are proving their work. The question is not whether action is needed, but why so many countries have yet to take meaningful action. Mandatory measures such as front of the pack labels, health taxes, marketing restriction have already reduced UPI usage in many countries like Argentina, Brazil, Colombia, Mexico. Why not in India? It is possible. The evidence threshold for action is met. Delaying regulation under the pretext of more research is truly unethical. Fifth, and this is my last point, protecting children from UPFs is a right obligation requiring national and global action. UPF flood children food environment because commercial interests dominate the policy spaces. Governments face strong industry pressure, we have seen it. Globally, UNICEF has done a survey showing that 70% of the government are citing this industry pressure as a barrier. States have a human right duty to act. That is non-negotiable. And UN agencies must help to strengthening the governance, preventing corporate interference, setting global standards, and building a national but also global action network that we've seen has been named yesterday or today.
Yes.
And this is all to protect children from unhealthy food environment. As of today's presentation, I've shown the momentum for action is now global. If countries like India, where UPF markets are expanding most rapidly, are among the faster to act, the collective impact will be significant. What is required next is political resolve, technical investment, and clear accountability across sectors. The task ahead is to move with coherence and urgency. Thank you very much.
Now the house is open to question and answer. If anybody has any questions,
Well said.
Yeah, this is a question to Dr. Vandana. You mentioned that the voluntary self-regulation is ineffective.
Yeah.
So, are there evidence or is there anecdotal?
No, the paper says so, with evidence.
Just to add, there is a 22 country study on this issue only. That study clearly shows that voluntary regulations have been ineffective in 22 country study. Yes, sir.
So my question is, have you seen that many multilateral agencies, donor agencies, those who fund studies, or even new organizations which are now fronted by retired government officers are now in the space of food advocacy, changing policies, directing policies. So do you, because normally what we have seen is that people only criticize, have only noticed how multinational corporations have control over the space of advocacy. But now do you notice that multilateral agencies, though Indian agencies, those who receive funds from outside, are acting like fronts for industry. So you really don't know from where the funds are coming in. So you may have an NGO, civil society, non-profit working in India, but it may have three layers of funding. So you really don't know the source. So do you see that happening also? Do you notice that?
Yeah, globally it has been analyzed in the graph which I showed, the 207. A lot of them have been actually such groups which were traced through the internet sources on their websites, So the data in the paper in detail about that network is actually based on extensive work done by the authors.
I think the
Yeah.
analysis of the whole Sun and Sun Business
Yeah.
Alliance shows you clearly how, by changing shapes, the industry, by creating foundations, trusts, and so on, and that, so it's a second foundation, then a third trust, then a third, fourth society, and then that whole link is showed up. I think that analysis of the Sun Business Alliance and how it changed structures also with respect to when it was criticized and then how it changed and so on. That's interesting to look at, and it would be useful. And in India, we have kind of institutionalized this through CSR by saying that, spend so much of your money on so-called social work. Why should you let that money go in taxes to the government and let government run all the services that we need for health and education, rather than leaving it to industry to use tax benefit to further their own markets in a different way and to reach communities so directly?
Even CII, FICCI, PhD Chamber of Commerce, they all
Yes, yeah.
all registered as non-profit
Exactly.
Yes.
organizations. So basically, and then lots of now retired IS officers who are
They're
now
going-
leading organizations which are influencing policy.
Absolutely.
It has not happened in the past, but it's a new trend that has started in the last year.
But also, I want to add that many, for example, UNICEF, I'm sure, but also many organizations are now putting safeguarding system to avoid that. Or UNICEF, it's very clear. We are going through a long list of verification before taking money from a donor or associating with a private sector because they have some CSR to fund. And I think it is not only UNICEF, I think it is increasing also.
There's some question there.
Mr. Arun Gupta, I have one question.
Can you identify yourself? Yeah.
Okay, I have one question. Like, it's a money-making commercial business industry. So how can you stop, these celebrities who are getting crores of money to publicize either Bicano, Pepsi, or whatever. And have you, included or called Chirag Paswan or Health Ministry for this to, just have a meeting with them because so much is happening from a long time. So any solution?
See, you're right, that's a money-making machine. That's why we call it a business model, right? Only a regulation or a legislation can prevent that, right? We cannot stop them from earning money because in 2012, Shah Rukh Khan said on a TV channel, he said that if government takes taxes, right, it is their revenue line. Why are they killing my revenue line? If they declare a product to be unhealthy, let them stop it. So they are all buying the same argument. So what I am saying is, that's why we are suggesting, the Lancet authors clearly suggest that you require a policy to do that. Then these celebrities will also stop. Regarding meeting with health and Chirag Paswan and other, the Chirag Paswan ministry is not responsible for doing such legislations. Actually, they are jumping in because the industry wants it, right? So the onus lies on the Ministry of Health, at the most you can say Niti Aayog, and then subsidiary Food Safety Authority. So these are the three areas which actually are for India's policies. They are responsible, and then all the state governments for implementation, and they can have their own laws. For example, states can do their own legislative matters without even consulting the government of India, that they can construct a school-based regulation at the local level. Some people are asking us what we can do. We are suggesting that. So we will seek an appointment, which we don't know whether we will get it or not, as I said earlier. So we have been writing to the Ministry of Health for ages to seek an appointment. So far, none. Now, if Lancet helps that, we will certainly do that. In January meeting, we intend to invite Ministry of Health, Ministry of Food Safety Authority, Niti Aayog, and the economic advisor also. So we are thinking of that multi-sector action, not stakeholder, but multi-sectoral action within the government, and we will advocate we will continue, and we are not going to stop for one meeting or two meetings. So with the 10 years, we have been working on ultra processed foods, and now is the time actually to scale up our advocacy.
And there are global examples showing success.
Yeah, there are examples of success globally,
Yes.
and we will certainly invite them also here. Maybe Mexico or Chile.
Chile.
We will invite them here to talk to the policymakers, and they are willing to come and spend their time.
Rima
Yes.
has a question.
Yeah, please.
In the you said that Brazil does a survey every 5 years
Yeah.
to find out how much of consumption of UPF. We had a dietary survey right now just some time back. Was UPF a part of it? If not, why not?
Sure. Can you identify yourself? So there is
Rima.
My name is Rama. I work for Times of India.
Times of India, Rima Nagarajan. Okay, so the India Diabetic Survey, they did a study of the same people whom they were investigating whether they have diabetes or not, or obesity or not. So that's been done in different stages over the 5-6 years, like few states and then next few states. Overall, the data was combined and published few months back, and that data clearly came up with a diagnosis that it's the carbohydrates, blaming the rice and roti for the whole problem of diabetes and obesity. So then I asked a question to the chief of the research that have you asked this question whether the people were eating ultra processed foods or not? So he said no, we did not. So then I read the paper also, it again clearly highlights that they missed out this question in that survey. So that's how it works. But we learned just few days back that NFHS has included, but the data is still lying with the ministry, and God knows when they are going to release it. So that has few questions pointing towards, not necessarily very clearly UPFs, but we can infer that there are few UPFs. Again, that data is on food frequency questions, like how many times you consumed per day or weekly. So something like that. That data might come out soon. If Bihar election was stopping that data, I don't know.
But those questionnaires are on the NFHS website that they have asked. Those questionnaires are there, they got it from FSSAI. Yes. Next question, please.
Hi, I'm Shagun from Down to Earth.
Mic
use
पे
the
बोलने
mic,
दो
Yeah,
ना.
sorry. I'm Shagun from Down to Earth. My first question is to Dr. Vandana. You spoke about different policies worldwide. Can you elaborate a bit on the kind of success these policies? Oh, sorry. On the success these policies have had, the link between these policies and how they've reduced the consumption of ultra processed foods, because Brazil, what I'd read recently was that even they don't tax a lot, they don't put a lot of tax on their UPFs. They do have school feeding programs, but they only tax the sweetened beverages, and that's all. Also, another question is to Dr. Gupta. From what you presented, it looks like the tobacco playbook also, what these companies are doing. Just saying that it's the consumer's choice rather than looking at the food environment. In your research, did you find that are they also funding a lot of nutrition research? And also, I wanted to ask you if now is the time to look at if we can put a cap on these reformulators, the additives, the coloring agents or emulsifiers. Can the government also put a cap on these?
Yeah. So I need the mic also.
नहीं? Mic देना.
Yeah, so I'm so glad that I read this paper in great detail because you asked me a nice question. So there's a whole box on Chile, and I would suggest that you read that. It's about, so they say that Chile did 3-4 things. It made a black octagonal front of package label that warns consumers that the food product is high in fat, sugar, and salt, or calories or combinations thereof. It had marketing restrictions on regulated foods and beverages to children younger than 14 years, what I mentioned also, including restrictions on advertising, promotions, free gifts, and depictions of cartoon characters on regulated foods, and school and nursery school restrictions on free distribution of regulated foods and banning their marketing. And then it says somewhere in this detailed box that at least evaluation show that this approach of integrated and reinforcing policies has successfully modified the food environment and consumer behavior, and that at least some of the effects are greater than those observed with single policies, and it gives some references for those observed with single policies. So basically it's trying to make the point that if you make more than one policy, it all adds together. After the law was implemented, notable reductions in the content of regulated nutrients in many HFSS categories were observed, though almost 50% of packaged foods continue to but almost 50% of packaged foods continue to carry a warning label. Marketing of HFSS products to children decreased in about 60% of products, and the availability of these products decreased by almost 80% in public school settings. So there is some evidence. I think tracing these all the way to nutritional outcomes, I'm not sure that, I don't think there's much, but I do recall some older studies that were single studies, not maybe part of this description, that talked about obesity reductions and so on. But then also the concern that though obesity, though HFSS products were reduced, obesity didn't come because UPF is not being regulated. So I think the point is that UPF regulation is a fairly recent phenomenon, and so therefore long-term secular trends may take a little bit longer. But I think that there is this data which the paper does carry.
Yeah, and to your question on the, we need to understand that all UPFs, most of them are HFSS also.
Yeah.
They are quite high level of HFSS. So that's what people keep on eating more without even knowing they are eating a lot of sugar in that sense. That's why the reasons that in some of the research in the obesity, the overweight happened, and then it went down also when this shifted to minimally processed foods. So on coming to the funding, yes, there is evidence that these networks have been funding research which can prove counter to or challenge the definition of ultra processed food, or even challenge the evidence that it's not good enough.
Yeah.
The authors did a detailed analysis. There's a Bradford-Hill criteria for causality. So there are 9 causality indicators. Out of that, this up to now, whatever research, and I tell you, after the papers have been accepted, there have been like 30-40 papers more have been published. Even yesterday there was a paper said 10% rise in UPF, 60% increase in diabetes in Europe. So this is coming more and more. So those are being funded to challenge the evidence. So these papers met the 7 of the 9 criteria of Bradford-Hill criteria, which is quite sufficient to initiate policy action. You don't have to wait. You can't conduct a randomized control trial.
It's not ethical.
For one state, कहाँ से लाओगे आप? Ethically नहीं. So छोटे जो भी 20, 30, 40 number पे trial हुए हैं, randomized control trial, they have happened in different parts of the world. Japan, US, Europe. So there are different places where they have happened. And this is a cap on cap on the UPF markers. So very simply, which I said, the 5 UPF markers which require attention and easily identified by people also are colors, flavor and flavor enhancers, non-nutritive sweeteners, and then the stabilizers, emulsifiers. There are many others. You won't be able to pronounce. If you check the ingredient list, if you can't pronounce a particular ingredient, that is probably UPF. Like several numbers like E220, E420, you know, so much. So that is where we are asking. So we are not asking stop HFSS. Number one, we should be sure, clear. This is not a call to stop the work on HFSS. This work adds to the ongoing efforts of HFSS and include recognition of UPFs, which should be regulated for marketing, and you will end up regulating all the HFSS also if you just do one regulation on UPF marketing. Yeah. Any more questions, please? No?
There's one reference for Brazil also, but there's no data given in this paper, but you can check out the reference for Brazil school meals where they say that the increased increased procurement of fruits, vegetables, and legumes as a result of regulation.
It's a regulation that you will buy 90% minimally processed food locally source करना है उनको. तो ये ब्राज़ील का ये उनका जीरो हंगर से मिल रहा है. जो पहले जो अभी भी प्रेसिडेंट हैं जैसे पहले थे प्रेसिडेंट लुला, उन्होंने ये पहले they started the zero hunger program where all the school meals and other meals for children, they were to be sourced from local economies. So that's how it has come up. Yeah. Okay then.
Okay.
Thank you very much for coming, and please have a cup of tea. It's on the table just for this organized today. So we thank you all, and if you have any questions, we will be happy to answer them. You can send an email or send me a WhatsApp message, or today, tomorrow, anytime.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so
We've
much.
arranged tea and some snacks. Please have them. Thank you all
Pleasure.
the experts.
Yes, we need to work very hard.
No, I'll tell you.